So tell me, see when you hear the phrase spiritual man, what comes to mind? Some soft-spoken guy sitting there cross-legged, burning incense, talking about love and light. That sensitive poet kind of guy who cries at sunsets. But let me tell you something, that's bullshit. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. See, true masculine spirituality, it's nothing to do about being softer. It's about becoming a true fucking savage. Because some of the most powerful men throughout history, they were deeply spiritual. And I can assure you, they definitely were not soft. They were warriors. They were kings. They were men who channeled that primal energy into their purpose. And today I'm going to break that stigma around this spiritual awakening for men. And then I'm going to show you why embracing your spiritual side actually means that you're awakening that savage within, your ultimate power. Right? And I remember 10 years ago when the concept of meditation was first brought up to me, right? I was a total mess, right? My life on the outside looked good. I had a really great sales job. I was top of the company in sales. So I had all the money and the respect. But inside, I was a shell of a man. My daughter had just been born. I was in so much fear, anxiety about being a good dad. My relationship with my wife was, rocky because I was abusing alcohol and drugs. So I was constantly high and anxious. And I was just looking for, validation from everywhere and finding it nowhere. But anyway, I was at this super low point, and I remember speaking to my friend, and he had I think it was about a year of sobriety at the time, but he was living this new spiritual life, and he said to me, "Why don't you try meditation?" And I just remember laughing at him, and I was like, "That I said something along the lines, that's for hippies, man. I don't have time for that woo-woo bullshit." Right? And I was so wrong, because fast forward to about 6 years ago, once again, I'm, on my knees. My wife is about to leave me. I'm at a new all-time low, and a rock bottom has a way of humbling you, so I was desperate to get sober, and I was desperate enough to try anything. I went to church, I started reading the Bible, and I was doing whatever, I could to try and get some sobriety. And I remember my friend suggested that I download Audible. He said that he'd started to, listen to his personal development books, and it was helping him. So I did, and one of the first books I got was called The 5 a.m. Club. And this time it spoke about meditation again, right? But this time I was ready to try it, because I was truly desperate. So it talks about, doing 20 minutes meditation, 20 minutes exercise, and then 20 minutes of personal development or journaling, right? And I started it. I remember it's clear as day, So I started with 20 minutes exercise, and then I would run to the beachfront on the cliffs, and I would meditate for 20 minutes. Okay. And I remember the first time I sat in silence for 20 minutes. It was one of the hardest things that I'd ever done. Not because it was peaceful. It's because I had to face all that fucking chaos inside me. All the pain, all the anger, all the fear, all the guilt, all the shame that I'd been running from so long. And this was probably the single most important thing that I could have done, was to start to meditate. Because I believe, when I started to meditate, that opened the door up for my spiritual awakening. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know how impactful my spiritual awakening was, and how it changed the direction of my life, and, helped me find sobriety, helped me find peace, helped me find, understand what love truly is, and how to give it and how to receive it. But most importantly, it led me to my sobriety, and I've been, sober for over 6 years now. But, one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned on this spiritual journey is that, see, spirituality is not about escaping a reality. It's about having the courage to face it head on, right? And that's not, about becoming weak. That's about actually, developing the strength to confront those demons, instead of numbing them. It's easy to numb them, right? I've done it for so long. Okay. And on this journey that I've been on for the past 6, 7 years, it's been a spiritual journey. And I was so hesitant about to discuss it, because I was so scared of how people would view me. But now I don't give a shit, because this journey has not made me softer. It's actually made me the most powerful I've ever felt in my life, than I've ever been before. Because I look back in my life, and I was a very weak man, because I gave into desires, and I gave into everything. Okay. And now it's, I'm in control of everything in my life. And if you just look at, if you go back and see throughout history, right, warriors have always been deeply spiritual. If you look at the samurais of Japan, right, the Spartans of ancient Greece, these are the most feared fighters and the most disciplined in mind and spirit. Now, the samurais, they follow the code of Bushido, which means the way of the warrior. And that's not just about, martial arts. That's also about meditation, poetry, and the connection with death. This is a spiritual practice. This doesn't diminish their capabilities and their deadliness. It just enhanced it. Right? They understood that true power comes from the mind. Okay? It comes from the mind, because the mind remains calm amidst all the chaos, and they needed that to survive. And even if you look at the Native Americans, they would undergo vision quests and spiritual ceremonies before battle. And the Vikings, they believed that their connection to the gods, Thor, Odin, and they gave them this fearlessness that made them legendary. And the Knights Templar, some of the most, formidable fighters, were deeply spiritual men who would pray multiple times a day. So this isn't coincidence. If you look at all these warriors of the past, this is a fundamental truth that the modern world has forgotten. Spiritual discipline is what forges legendary warriors. These, even in the modern day warriors. Psychologically, this makes perfect sense. Right? See, there was research done at Stanford's Center for Compassion, and it shows that meditation activates the parasympathetic nervous system, not to make you passive, but it gives you mastery over that fight or flight response. So you gain the power to choose when you unleash your aggression rather than be controlled by it. So it puts you in the driver's seat. If I would have done that for a lot of my life, I wouldn't have went to prison. Okay, and when the average man gets triggered, his prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, that goes offline, and he reacts purely from the reptilian brain. But the spiritual disciplined man, he will maintain access to his full cognitive capacity, even under extreme stress. This is, and if you look at this, is what makes Navy SEALs so effective. Their training is as much spiritual as it is physical. Learning to control breathing, maintain presence under pressure, and find what they call the calm within the storm. This is not softness. This is ultimate control. Okay, and there was another study in 2022, right, at the University of California, right, and they found that men who engaged in regular spiritual practices showed higher testosterone levels and better recovery from stress than those who didn't. Okay, they weren't becoming softer. They were becoming stronger, more resilient, and more capable of handling life's little challenges or even big challenges. Okay, and there's plenty of other studies to back this up. Okay, where they show that men with regular meditation practices, have significantly enhanced neural connectivity, right? And especially in the areas that govern attention, emotional regulation, and decision making. Their brains are literally becoming more powerful through, spiritual discipline, right? And it's unbelievable to know how spiritual practices, they literally change your DNA. And this is what epigenetics has taught us. And men who meditate regularly, they show reduced inflammation markers, and they have an enhanced immune system. So their bodies are becoming stronger, not just mentally, but physically. They're becoming optimized machines. So the spiritual man isn't just removing his edge, he's sharpening it. Think about it. Really, what's more powerful, being triggered by every little thing or having the presence of mind to respond strategically? Okay, what's more impactful, being consistently distracted or having laser focus on whatever it is your mission in life? Who's more dangerous in a crisis? A man who panics or a man who breathes and can see clearly? Okay, the most dangerous men in history weren't berserkers who just lost control. They were warriors who maintained absolute clarity in chaos. The famous swordsman, Miyamoto Mushimi, I think that's how you pronounce it. And he wrote the book called the Five Rings. And he was one of the Japanese greatest swordsmen. And but he was also a philosopher. He was into poetry. And that's what his book's about, the Five Rings. I would recommend that you read it. And then you've got Marcus Aurelius, and he ruled the Roman Empire, practicing Stoic meditation daily. He's even got a book called Meditations. Okay, and this is where the savage awakens, not by suppressing your masculine nature, but by channeling it with purpose and precision. The spiritual man isn't running from his power. He's fully embodying it. He's stepping into it. And when you develop spiritual discipline, you don't become less of a man. You become what most men are afraid of to become, a fully activated man in your masculine power. Okay, and apologies for the throat. I've been ill for days, but I still want to show up here and, bring these videos because I committed to 75 days every day and I'm not missing it. So yeah, my voice is gone. I've been, ill for the past week, but you know what? I love you guys, so I'm showing up. So how do we put this into action? Right? There's many different ways, but I'm just going to give you the 5, specific practices that I've used in my life, right? And it's transformed my life. And then the many men that I've helped outside of this. Okay. And the first thing is, you really have to establish a morning ritual that connects you with yourself before the world tries to, you know, claim your attention. And the way I do it now is I start with my 20 minutes meditation, right? And then I follow that by breathwork. Now, there has been periods where I've done cold immersion, but I haven't been doing that recently because the tub that I had is dismantled and we're waiting for a new one. But I'll be going back into that probably in the summertime. Okay, and this is self-forging. You're meditating, you're calming your mind, and then you're putting your body through some breathwork or cold immersion. Okay, and the key here is consistency over intensity. I know how difficult it is to do cold immersion, right? Meditation as well. I I shied away from it for a long time. So see if you can't do 20 minutes, do 10 minutes, right? And then or do 5 minutes, and then work your way up. But what's important is that you do it every single day. Okay, and I use a specific meditation technique, and I call it presence point. And that's where you focus on feeling your entire body at the same time while breathing deeply. And what this does is this activates, the whole brain synchronization. So this is where both your left and right hemisphere of your brain, they begin to work together, right? And then when you combine that with, cold exposure, for example, just even if you do 30 seconds in a cold shower, right, you know, that will trigger a cascade of neurochemicals, and these chemicals strengthen your nervous system. Resilience is unbelievable. Okay, because the studies that I've looked at here, right, they increase the dopamine by 250%, right? And it's in norepinephrine by 530%. So this is where your focus and your power, these are the neurochemicals for that, right? And the second practice, which I highly recommend, for everyone on this planet, is to practice presence in every single thing that you do. The more that you can be present in the moment, the better your life will be. I can assure you that. Okay, whether you're in a meeting, breakfast with your children, you're in the gym, you're at work, you're driving the car. Okay, the longer you can be present, the happier you will be, right? Because the average man is constantly distracted, right? But see, when you're tapping into that spiritual savage, you're intensely present. Okay, and I use another process. It's called sacred moments, right? So I'll do this 3 times a day, where I'll just stop whatever I'm doing. Okay, and sometimes I'll do that more than 3 times. Depending on how my head is that day, or if I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed. I just stop for 60 seconds, right? I plant my feet on the ground. Scan my whole body to see if I've got any tension. I take 5 big deep belly breaths, right, and then I just commit to being fully present, right? And when you do this, you reset your whole body, right? And this prevents the mental drift that steals my presence throughout the day, and it gets me back into the moment. Okay, and the third one is just every single day practice discomfort, right? Because see, your comfort zone is a cage. Right? Spiritual warriors throughout history, understood that voluntary hardship builds true power, spiritual power. And this might be, you might want to, fast one day a week, cold showers or physical challenges that truly push your limits. Now, personally, I do this. I strengthen my body in this time. So I spend at least 90 minutes doing some type of intense physical workout 6 days a week. And then I'll fast one day a week, once a week as well. So, and I'm not talking about going and just doing the gym and, shooting the shit. I'm talking about going so I'm sweating and put myself in discomfort. Okay, because the Spartans, they practiced voluntary discomfort. They done that as a spiritual training, right? So, and so did the Stoics, and so did the Buddhist monks. This isn't machoism. This is mastery. When you voluntarily embrace discomfort, right? Real world challenges lose their power over you, right? And the fourth one is, again, I can't stress this highly enough, is to reconnect with nature regularly. Right, there's something, truly amazing and primal about standing, in the woods. I've got a castle next to where I live, and I go in the grounds because we're allowed to walk in it, and there's a big, beautiful lake, and just going down there and hearing the water crash, there's just something truly magnificent about that. Okay, and, just walking through the woods, seeing the nature, the birds, I just love it. Right, because nature strips away all the trickery of this modern world, and then it reconnects us with something deeper within ourselves. And the indigenous cultures understood this, right? This is why they done vision quests, and nature immersions, and these were fundamental to masculine spiritual development. Right, so I spend about 45 minutes to an hour a day in nature. My dog and I go out in nature, and nature is my go-to place. Even my head is bouncing all over the place and try to play tricks on me. Okay, I know if I go into nature for an hour, I will leave there feeling like a different man. I will feel grounded. In fact, that's where I get a lot of my creative inspiration, is in nature. Right, and the last one is, find a brotherhood, find mentors who understand the path. See, true masculine spirituality, it thrives in brotherhood, not in isolation. This isn't about group therapy sessions. This is about iron sharpening iron. Right? Throughout history, men gathered in councils, warrior circles, lodges, okay, to support each other. Right? And what today's men is do, they try to walk alone, and it's killing them. Right? So find, two other men you can completely trust and be honest with. Meet them regular, hold each other accountable, push each other to grow. Okay, and this is why I created this channel. It's to build my own warrior circle with like-minded men who are ready to step in to their true nature and purpose. Okay, because see, these practices, these aren't about becoming softer or gentler. They're about becoming more formidable, more focused, more alive, more powerful, more of who you are. Right? The average man is disconnected from his power. Right? He's reactive, distracted, and spiritually asleep. Right? These 5 practices, whether you make your own version of them and incorporate what works for you, but they will, if you commit to doing this, they will waken a part of you that's been sleeping. Okay, a part of you that will be unstoppable, purpose-driven, clear-eyed. Okay, even if you just start with one, commit to it for 30 days. I promise you'll notice a difference. You'll feel something powerful wakening inside you. Something that's been desperate to, come out. It's just been lying there dormant, waiting to be awoken. Okay, and let me be clear, right? The world doesn't need more passive men. It doesn't need more nice guys who suppress their power to make others feel comfortable. The world desperately needs men who have integrated their savagery with their wisdom. Men who can be fierce and compassionate. Men who can protect what matters and surrender their ego when necessary. Okay, this is the path of the spiritual warrior. This is the journey of the awakened savage. When you embrace true masculine spirituality, you don't become weaker, you become unstoppable. But instead of being controlled by your impulses, you harness them for your purpose. Instead of being driven by fear, you're guided by your vision. This isn't about transcending your masculinity, it's about embodying it fully, consciously, and powerfully. Okay, so if something inside you resonated with today's message and you've got this far, it's time to take action. Okay, start with just, it's one of the things that I spoke about. Incorporate it into your day, or sit in tomorrow morning, sit with your thoughts, your feelings, and understand your power. Begin the journey of awakening. Okay, and if you want to join this journey with me, drop a comment below. I'm ready, because, this journey is, for me, it's just beginning, right? And I'm here to share it with you. And if you know that another man who needs to hear this message, share it with him so he can join the journey with us. Okay, because remember, true masculine spirituality isn't soft. It's your ultimate power, and you're the one that's in control of it. Okay? And I truly appreciate you guys, and thanks for sticking with me this long, even if my voice might have put you off. But I truly love you guys. Have a great day. I'll catch you on the next one. I'll have another video here, and you can subscribe here. Take care.